For over 1,000 years, the Roman Empire was the center of the known world. Its armies conquered continents, its laws defined justice, its roads connected civilizations. To the Romans themselves, the idea that their empire could ever fall was unthinkable. Rome wasn't just powerful, it was eternal. And yet, today, it exists only in ruins and echoes. So, how did the most powerful empire humanity had ever created simply disappear? Was it the barbarian invasions? Did Christianity weaken its foundations, or did it collapse because it became too big to sustain itself? The truth is far more complex than the myths we've been told. The fall of Rome wasn't a single event. It was a slow, creeping decay, built over centuries. Tonight, we uncover the real reasons. By the early 2nd century, Rome was at its absolute peak. Under Emperor Trajan, the empire stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia, ruling nearly a quarter of the world's population. Its success was built on several pillars: unmatched military supremacy, brilliant infrastructure like roads and aqueducts, a unified legal system, and the clever integration of conquered peoples. But here is the paradox. The very systems that built Rome's greatness would eventually become the seeds of its destruction. To the average citizen living during the Pax Romana, or Roman peace, life seemed stable and secure. But this stability rested on a dangerously fragile assumption that a wise and competent emperor would always be in charge. That assumption proved fatal. After the death of the philosopher Emperor Marcus Aurelius, power passed to his son, Commodus. This was a turning point. Commodus ruled through vanity and cruelty, weakening institutions and setting a terrible precedent. Rome would no longer be governed by wisdom, but by the whims of personality. This led directly to the crisis of the 3rd century, one of the darkest periods in Roman history. Between the years 235 and 284, the empire nearly destroyed itself from within. In just 50 years, more than 20 emperors seized power, and most were assassinated. Civil wars became constant. The Roman army, not the Senate, became the true kingmaker. Whoever controlled the legions controlled the empire, and political legitimacy vanished. While Romans fought Romans, the empire's borders were left wide open and vulnerable. This constant warfare had a devastating economic cost. To pay the soldiers who kept them in power, emperors did something desperate. They debased the currency. They dramatically reduced the silver content in coins, which destroyed their value. The result was runaway inflation. Prices soared and trust in the economy evaporated. To make up for the shortfall, taxes were hiked to unbearable levels. Small farmers were crushed, forced to abandon their land and work for wealthy aristocrats. In a system that looked a lot like medieval Rome's once dynamic global economy began to shrink, fracturing into isolated, local economies just trying to survive. As if civil war and economic collapse weren't enough, Rome was also facing a demographic crisis. A series of devastating plagues swept through the empire, killing millions. Cities lost their workers, farms lost their laborers, and the army lost its recruits. With fewer people, there was less production, less tax revenue, and a much weaker defense. Rome's greatest strength had always been its scale, but now it could no longer sustain its own immense size. The empire was simply too big to control effectively. Communication across its vast territories took weeks, even months. Orders from Rome would arrive too late to matter. To cope with this, Emperor Diocletian made a radical decision. He divided the empire into an eastern and a western half, each with its own ruler, to make it more manageable. This administrative split helped the empire survive in the short term, but it fractured Roman unity forever. The two halves began to drift apart, developing their own distinct cultures and priorities. At the same time, the Roman army was losing its identity. Originally, the legions were made up of Roman citizens defending their homeland. But by the 4th century, most Romans avoided military service. The army had to rely on foreign mercenaries, often from the very barbarian tribes they were supposed to be fighting. Entire legions were filled with soldiers who didn't speak Latin, and whose loyalty was to their commanders and their pay, not to the idea of Rome. An empire cannot survive when its own defenders don't believe in it. This brings us to the barbarians. Contrary to the popular image of savage hordes destroying civilization, barbarians didn't cause the fall of Rome. They were a symptom of it. For centuries, they had entered the empire peacefully as refugees, allies, and mercenaries. But Rome's own internal corruption, exploitation, and weakness turned these potential allies into enemies. When the Visigoths sacked the city of Rome in 410, it sent a shockwave across the world. The Eternal City was no longer untouchable. Rome was no longer feared. And what about Christianity? The rise of Christianity didn't cause the fall of Rome, but it fundamentally transformed it. As the new religion spread, loyalties began to shift away from the emperor and the state and toward God and the church. As imperial authority crumbled, the organized structure of the church stepped in to fill the power vacuum, providing social services and leadership. Rome didn't just disappear. Its soul was changing into something new. So when the last Western Roman emperor was quietly deposed in the year 476, there was no great final battle. There was hardly any resistance. Because, in truth, the Western Roman Empire was already gone. It had died administratively, economically, and culturally long before the last emperor was sent into retirement. Its institutions had failed. Its economy was broken. Its people had lost their shared identity. The Eastern Empire, later known as Byzantium, would survive for another 1,000 years, but the West faded into what we now call the Dark Ages. The real story of Rome's fall is that it was slow, complex, and almost unnoticeable to many people living through it. It teaches us a timeless and uncomfortable lesson. Great civilizations don't usually collapse from a single, dramatic blow. They rot from within. They fail because of political instability, economic inequality, and the loss of a common purpose. Rome's story isn't ancient history. It's a warning. The Roman Empire believed it was immortal. History proved otherwise. If you want to understand history without the myths and uncover the lessons that still matter today, subscribe to Truthline Fact, like this video, and let us know in the comments. What do you think was the single biggest reason for Rome's collapse? Thank you for watching.